Everyone has a story. I get them to tell it. Welcome to the Aron Bender Podcast, conversations with media personalities about their personal and professional lives and journeys. Thank you so much for all your support, whether you're watching on YouTube, IGTV, or DBNA TV at dbnatelevision.tv, or streaming with the DBNA TV app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV, or listening on your favorite platform. Before we get to my conversation with Jonathon Aslay, a little about my story. I'm a widowed dad of two girls who just lost their mom, a grieving husband, a man in recovery trying to reconnect with the world with fresh eyes, faith, and perspective, a college journalism professor, a white guy in a world of injustice, a 20-year broadcast media veteran who had his dream job and then lost it. Nearly 2 years ago, God gave me a gift, an opportunity to stop, step back, and breathe so I can learn about love, vulnerability, forgiveness, grace, self-care, patience, and understanding. Jonathon Aslay is a midlife dating coach who discovered his passion midlife, pushed into this arena by a divorce and the loss of his job. So you've always been brokering things, but it's going from insurance to dating. Yeah. What was the change for you?
Well, after going through a divorce, after turning 40 and going through a divorce, I found myself back out in the marketplace. And at the time I was going through divorce, I also lost my $250,000 a year job. And it really devastated me. And thankfully, we had assets from our divorce that allowed me to sustain my lifestyle. But I was actively online dating, and I got quite addicted to online dating. What I mean is I got addicted to talking to women incessantly. I mean, my first year after my divorce, I think I spent what felt like 5,000 hours on the telephone, just talking to women all across the country and dating. And what was interesting was a lot of women I was just making friends with, and we would just talk about dating and profiles. And will you look at my profile and tell me what you think? So I started to give advice on how to improve their dating profile. And since I was already, not working and burnt out, I was like, hey, why don't I charge money for this? So I started to charge like $100 to help people with their profiles. And then what I would do is I would then read men's profiles and give my opinion of what I think of these men that women were talking to from the male perspective. And I realized I had a knack for it. And so I jokingly say, just like the FBI have profilers for serial killers, I can profile serial daters, serial monogamous, nice guys, bad boys, and the guy looking for you. And literally my business was birthed. And since then, I've been blessed to have a very successful mid six-figure business that allows me to have a great lifestyle and only work 4 hours a day.
I'm going to go back to something you said right out of the gate, but before we get too far away from the starting a business angle, at what point did you say, you know what, this is going to be a business? This is something I'm going to put 100% effort into. And it's not just a hobby. It's not just like, okay, $100 here, $500 there.
Yeah, no, I'll never forget. It was November 2009. And I'd been doing it for 3 or 4 years. I was send me a Starbucks card and I'll give you my advice kind of thing. I wrote out a tiny little business plan, and I remember sharing it with my dearest friends. Now, these are guys I went to high school with, college with, and they all looked at me like, what the, can I curse?
Yes, you can.
Like, what the fuck are you thinking? This is just, you're not going to be successful at this.
Yeah.
And we were at dinner, and I showed them my business plan. It was a tiny little business plan, or one-page business plan, I should say. And, was it Cortez? I burned the boats at that point, and in the winter of 2009, and I just started to go full bore. And by 2011, I was self-sufficient in my business. In other words, my income was covering all my expenses. So it took me about a year to get to that place.
How did that fit with the plan?
The plan wasn't so much the financial end of it. The plan was just to do it.
Yeah.
And kind of a little bit of the methodology. And what's interesting is my business and my coaching style has morphed quite a bit in the last decade. And partially because we've had a lot of changes in the dating realm in the last decade too.
Yeah.
So, but to the extent the plan was more just do it. Literally that was the plan. Just, in other words, just have faith and do it. It was really more of a tiny mission statement, if anything.
Let's go back to two things you mentioned earlier. Here we are, 06, 07, divorce. You lose that insurance brokerage job. How big of a hit was that for you in terms of career versus identity? How much had those both, as a married man and as this, $250,000 a year job, they're both gone?
Yeah, well, quite frankly, I mean, and it's a great question. I appreciate that you picked up on that. So I was drinking heavily. I was doing drugs on a regular basis to numb the pain. I was in a significant amount of emotional pain, and dating was my third drug of choice. So I became a serial dater as a way to fill that whatever voids were in my emotional state of being. Talking to women was just temporarily filling that void. I didn't realize it was going to end up being my pathway to my profession. So, through my dysfunctionality, I found my empowerment. Now, statistically speaking, 9 out of 10 people, I mean, once they go down the rabbit hole of despair, they rarely ever come out. And when I say 9 out of 10, that's anecdotal on my part. I mean, it could be higher or lower. It did affect my my sense of identity for well over a decade when this happened. So I don't think I really ever, it took me about a decade to emotionally recover from the to the falling into the pit of despair to getting out of the pit of despair.
Is that something that those two life events brought on, or was the drinking and the drugs always kind of just under the surface, if you will, and then those two life events, the divorce and losing your job, just catapulted those things to the fore?
Well, I was kind of a recreational user anyway, I mean, both alcohol and occasionally drugs and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Coke was my drug of choice. It became more of self-medication after the divorce. But once my identity started to come back, I wasn't dependent upon it. So I wasn't, thankfully, I wasn't an addict that I needed it per se, just to get through the day. It was more of a self-medication. What changed for me was at the same time, I also was doing a deep dive into personal development. In 2006, the movie The Secret came out. And I really identified with the movie The Secret from a law of attraction, what energy you put out is the energy you get back kind of thing. I did the Tony Robbins event in 2011. I did Unleash Your Power. And what happened was I began at this same, and I stopped doing drugs around 2010. What replaced drugs was personal development, self-help, and spiritual work.
Considering you've got two young sons at home, they're going through this divorce along with you. They're going through this job loss along with you. How did it affect them and also your relationship with them?
So I appreciate you asking, and this is a very difficult thing for me to discuss, because I would say for the first 6 years of the divorce, or from what happened till about 6 years, I was literally in a walking coma. Especially with respects to my boys. And I have a deep amount of regret for that. I was very myopic and very selfish during that period of time. And to the extent that I, did my best to be a good father, thankfully they have a great mother, and she was a great support person. She did the heavy lifting. I would say in the last 10 years, I've been shifted dramatically as being more of a proactive parent, but I was very unconscious during that period of time. And why I bring this up is I can relate to a lot of men who in their 40s go through a divorce, and they actually have a very similar experience, not exactly as mine, but I mean, to some degree, whether it's drugs and alcohol or disassociating with their children. And men get thrown under the bus for this behavior as a lack of character. And I can say that while I mean, I have deep regret over my actions or lack of actions. I was so paralyzed emotionally because I was so emotionally stunted for so many years of my life, that then being judged and shamed for my actions just took me down even more, and it put more emotional pressure on me. So this is why I'm more of an advocate for having compassion and understanding, because most human beings, they really do the best they can. Sometimes we can only do so good with what we have, because we haven't been really educated on an emotional level. We're educated on what 2 + 2 is, and what the Magna Carta is, or whatever. I don't even know what the fuck it is anyway. But and the Pythagorean theorem or whatever.
Yeah, I don't remember any of that shit.
Little,
I don't remember any of it.
Yeah, and so little so little is done to help human beings from an emotional level. And boys in particular are often raised with a stuffing of our feelings, and masculinity is more defined through violence and physical action towards other boys than actually connecting with our emotional side. And I don't like to use the term feminine. I just mean our capacity to navigate our emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah, there's so many different directions we could go through this. I know you've written a book about this very thing. You've written you have a lot of coaching programs on your website. At what point, because it's one thing to dispense advice to paying clients. Okay, this person wants advice about dating. This particular person wants this specific advice. But then you're like, you know what? I've got to go broad with this. At what point did you decide that's where you wanted to go?
Great question. I really appreciate that. So as a dating and relationship coach, I began to recognize that dating triggers the #1 emotional health issue facing most every human being. And that is, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and I'm not likable, at a core unconscious level within most humans. And so, and women in particular, I would find that they would give their power away to a man in relationship, partially because we've been, indoctrinated into a patriarchal society, although that's shifting. So it's always been kind of a one up, one down dynamic for women. Now women have an opportunity to be, to the extent to have some, I don't want to even use the word equality, but their own say in the matter. And yet I witnessed women give their power away. So I began writing blogs about what I'd call self-love means this and self-love means that from the dating perspective. What totally shifted though for me was in the summer of 2018, I lost my 18-year-old son, Connor, that's him right there in the picture, to an accident. And anyone who's a parent knows your greatest nightmare, and it's, is to lose a child. And then for the 19 years he existed, I don't think I ever went to bed not having a fear around that to some degree, or some worry, is my child okay? Is my child okay? Constantly. Maybe too much worry on my part. 2 months after he passed away, I just said, fuck it. I was actually writing a book called Compassionate Dating: Why Modern Romance Needs a Makeover. And if anyone steals that, trademark Jonathon Aslay. And I said, I had to abandon that. And I started to do a deep dive in writing my second book. The title is What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? It's a journey of personal development, self-help, and spiritual work. Because I recognized I was able to navigate the loss of him actually rather, I don't want to say the word with ease, because that wouldn't be a true statement, but I didn't go down that rabbit hole of despair I did when I lost my job, like so many people would when they lose a child. And I recognized that it was the personal development, self-help, and spiritual work in advance that shored. It was like a vaccination. We'll think about vaccinations right now, a vaccination to emotional chaos. So this is a copy of my second book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? And a lot of people get turned off by the word self-love. So for anyone that feels that way, let me make it simpler. Self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline. It's just all wrapped up into love. And the reason why self-love is important is just like when the flight attendant tells you, in the case of cabin pressure change, put the oxygen mask on yourself first if you're traveling with a child. It starts within, because our capacity to love others is only, in many people give love to others at the expense of self. No, love others through your loving of yourself. And that's the message in my book.
Yeah, we go back to the idea of, the rabbit hole you nearly went down after your divorce, after you lost your job, and then 10, 12 years, give or take, to get yourself into a position to be able to handle the death of one of your sons.
Yeah.
Had any of those events happened closer together, and the death of your son came just 7 months after your mom passed away.
Oh, good. Well,
So-
I was just about to say my mom passed away 7 months earlier. So, I mean, now that one was a little bit easier to navigate because it's kind of the natural order of things.
You
There's a
expect
picture of
that, right?
my
At
mom
some
and dad.
point.
Yeah, but she was 88. So but I got to say goodbye. I didn't get to say goodbye to my son. That's the hard part.
But you were in a better place personally, and
Yes.
also your relationship with him.
Yes. Oh, no. And thankfully, our last communication with one another, or physical communication, was just 2 days earlier. And we always had the same ritual. We'd spend time together, and then I'd drive him home most of the time. I'd pick him up, or we would connect. And it was always a hug, a kiss, I love you. Those were always the last three things we did. So at least a conscious amount, well, I did see his lifeless body, so I'm saying prior to that,
Yes.
was at least that experience.
Yeah, and my wife passed away just in November. Terminal breast cancer. She fought all last year.
This past November.
Just this past
Oh,
November.
okay. Wow.
Yeah. So she was first diagnosed in 2017, fought it all of 2018 after a double mastectomy. And 2019 was a relatively healthy year for her. And then 2020, it just came back with a vengeance, spread everywhere. And by November, just couldn't fight anymore. And some of the things that you're talking about really ring true with me. The idea of just emotionally stunted from adolescence. And it was really my wife who opened my eyes to the idea of, if I tamp down and try not to feel pain, discomfort, hurt, anything like that, I'm also shutting myself off from joy and happiness and all the other feelings. Like, I don't want to feel pain. Well, what I didn't understand was, by not feeling pain, you're also not feeling anything else.
Yeah, well, no, there's no doubt about it. Many people shut up. Well, they either shut off the pain completely, or they go down, substance abuse, if you will, to navigate the pain. I believe ultimately, at least with death in particular, we honor our loved ones who passed away by actually living a more fulfilled life. So the last thing they would ever want us to do is shut off the pain, or numb the pain, or shut off our lives. They want the exact opposite. So in his honor, and my mom's honor, if you will, I'm going to do my best to live my fullest expression of life and not cut myself off from the emotions. And I'm sure you've experienced this. I can't tell you how often I'll watch a movie where there'll be a death scene or something. And I mean, it brings me right back to that moment.
Yeah, I was just watching a show yesterday, and one of the characters was in the hospital, and, not in a coma like my wife was for the last day and a half of her life, not terminal like she was for many months, really, but just seeing that character in a hospital bed with people around him, concerned for his life, boom, right back there. Yeah. Right back there.
And I'm going to give you a flip side of that, and we can move on. But not that I'm cutting off, emotions. It also could be, I see a happy child riding a skateboard, and then, oh fuck, that reminds me of him. So I don't go. The only analogy I can give is, I have a thorn in my foot, and I feel it every day. In other words, there's a pain. I can navigate through the pain. I've learned to navigate through this thorn that's in my foot, if you will. And there are some days that it's inflamed and I feel it greater, and other days I don't notice it. But that's the analogy I have for myself.
And I'll put a bow on this part of the conversation in this way, in that again, it goes back to something you mentioned in our conversation, and something you've mentioned in your video blogs and your YouTube and things. The idea of now being able to feel and recognize feelings. I, over the last 9 to 10 months, have been feeling things that I've not let myself ever feel. And just I don't want to suggest that I'm happy feeling grief. I don't want to suggest that I'm happy feeling sadness. However, I take great joy in feeling every feeling that I need to feel, because I spent 4 decades not feeling any of those things.
You know, I'm going to share something that piggybacks on what you just shared, and thank you. My dear friends and I remember it was a year ago on my birthday, maybe it was 2 years ago, and it was the year after he passed away. And I'm with my 3 closest friends, and we're having dinner one night, and we got into the conversation about talking about Connor, and it got rather emotional. And I started to say, hey guys, let's share what we appreciate about, and there was 3 of us.
Yeah.
What do we appreciate about each other, and what do we respect about each other? And it got rather emotional. And here we are at the table, we're holding each other's hands. And I'm sure people around us might have thought something, not that there's anything wrong with that, but
thank you, Jerry Seinfeld. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it was like for 1 hour, we were sobbing.
Oh.
And these are men in their 50s who, and
I love
they
that.
each said, we've never done this with each other before. And so this is one of the challenges women have in understanding men, just like men have challenges understanding women, is that in many cases, most men like yourself and myself, we've been closed off to our emotional side for decades. And oftentimes it takes a humbling event to shift us from a unconscious egoic way of living to more of a heart-centered way of living. And then even when you start living a heart-centered way, you become judged for that, for being too feminine as a male, you know. And I'm actually, you know, and I resent, and this is my rant for a second, but I resent that people are so unconscious that they don't recognize that real empowerment is actually leaning into your feelings and navigating it from a healthy place versus shutting it off, because that's what the perception of masculinity is, and it's the furthest thing from truth. True masculinity is actually, or femininity, if you will, is leaning into your emotional side from an empowered place. And that's, again, coming back to my book, that's the narrative, and that's the message I have for the universe. Is my dating advice isn't dating advice. It's be empowered to love on yourself, because when you love on yourself, you are in the best relationship of your life. The relationship you have with self.
No masculinity, no femininity. It's just humanity. It
exactly
the definition of humanity, to be able to feel the entire spectrum of what's going on inside you.
Yeah.
What was your relationship like with your older son since Connor passed away?
So I've always had a really good interpersonal relationship with my older son. So thankfully, we've had that in our repertoire to begin with. It's been a little bit strained because he doesn't want to go there as much as I want to go there. So it makes him feel uncomfortable. So usually when I want to have a chat about Connor, I actually talk to my ex-wife. In fact, she's the only person on this planet where she mirrors what I'm feeling, if you will. So when we do talk, we sometimes get on the phone for 2 minutes talking about some financial thing from 10 years ago, and then we'd spend 2 hours talking about our pain of Connor, and it brings, it's a cathartic relief. Thankfully, I've been blessed. Colin, my oldest son, who's pictured there in the cheese hat, he's always been an old soul, so he's so far more superior than I ever was on an emotional level. partially because I indoctrinated my boys 10 years ago into Tony Robbins and Esther Hicks. I mean, they'd have to listen to my personal development CDs in the car along with Joe Jackson. And so they know every Joe Jackson song, and they've listened to every Tony Robbins CD.
Nice.
So he's a little bit more advanced than most kids his age, and he's 25.
That's good. That's good. Dating before the pandemic and since the pandemic, how have things shifted?
In my own personal life or just in general?
Yes and yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, the pandemic certainly had made it more challenging to meet people. So there was an even greater increase with the use of online dating tools to meet with people. Here's the thing. Online dating is a tool to connect with people, but it's also very desensitized. And sadly, most people don't put a great representation of themselves out there. So, and a lot of people are walled up to begin with. So it is a challenge to meet through this medium. I will say that I don't think it's going away. I think we're going to see 75, 80% of all new relationships in the future actually come through an online connection, because especially for my age demographic, which is the over 40 crowd, I'm a midlife dating a relationship coach. I don't focus on the 20 and 30-year-olds. And it's because most people in midlife aren't surrounded by single eligible people.
Yeah.
The real challenge, though, is emotional maturity. When you think of what causes most divorces, it's really, they cite money and sex as the primary reason. It's actually, most human beings are walking around unconscious from a level of emotional maturity. And to have an interpersonal romantic relationship with someone who's emotionally stunted or immature, and let me be clear for any woman watching this, I know you all think it's men. Women are equally emotionally stunted and immature as men. Equally. For if there's 100 men emotionally stunted, there's 100 women. It is not 99, it's 100. And women oftentimes, because they tend to be emotional, they see it a different way. But vomiting your emotions doesn't include emotional maturity either. So, the challenge, and I've only had a handful of people I've met and they haven't gone anywhere. And that's okay, because I've spent the last 3 years since Connor passed away working on the best relationship in my life, and that's me.
I've written bios for myself on websites, professional websites, LinkedIn, or, stations I've worked for over the years. Yeah. Why are bios so difficult to write?
I would say most people don't know how to write about themselves, just first and foremost. And secondly, to really capture the essence of who you are in 1 to 2 paragraphs is a challenge. And by the way, think about it. 80% of the population 70% of people in school got C's or worse, in writing. How many people are true wordsmiths and then take it to the next level of being able to write, a book like an Eat, Pray, Love or something like that? Not that I'm glorifying that book, or, you could say Game of Thrones or whatever, but to be a writer is a very small percentage of the population. The sad thing is there are people that can do this for you, but people won't avail themselves of these opportunities. There's a service for $100. You could have a professionally written profile. A company is called eCyrano. It's owned by Evan Mark Katz. And for literally $100, someone could write your profile. Well, that's too much money. And I'm like, people will think that's too much money. I'm like, this is to find a soulmate. If you're not willing to invest $100 in an essay and $200 by having a professional photographer I'm not talking about just take photographs of you out by a park, or something. Most people put such a terrible representation of themselves, and that's a level of emotional maturity. Poor representation, poor results. Garbage in, garbage out.
Is your advice, because you've mentioned, you kind of transitioned into this niche of advising men on how they should date and things like that. Is your advice more for men or for women?
Well, my my audience is women because women are more apt to pay for advice than men. Men will pay to learn how to meet women, okay? Most men's challenge is the confidence to walk up to a stranger and say hello. That's where they'll spend money. Women will spend money on why do men do this and why do men do that and why do men do this. So I'm the teacher that starts with where my audience is most interested in. However, there's an old saying, tell them what they need, or excuse me, or what, now I forgot the whole saying, but it's basically, I tell them what they want, but I give them what they need. My coaching practice, my YouTube channel, even though it's mostly for women, it's completely for men at the same time, because I have one single message: empower yourself. Okay? Don't give your power away, and recognize compassion, because compassion versus the ego is insidious. And we humans, especially here in the United States, are suckling on the nipple of, I need you to love me so I can feel good about myself. We are such a, an unconscious group of human beings here. Now, a lot of people get offended by saying this, but unconscious to your own emotions. And then you wonder why we struggle. And let me say one thing. People will spend more time brushing their teeth, combing their hair, getting dressed in the morning than they do ever on emotional health. People will spend more time playing golf than on their emotional health. They'll spend more time on television watching the Kardashians or something than on their emotional health. I spend an hour a day strictly on my emotional health, because that's just as important as everything else. And when you see a society that spends little or no time on emotional health, you wonder why we're so fucking dysfunctional.
That hour a day you spend on emotional health, what are you doing during that time?
I'm masturbating. Oh, just kidding. No. Well, I can multitask, right? No. It includes watching videos, reading books, listening to podcasts, and mostly in the area of personal development, self-help, and spiritual work. I also, for 3 years, did a Course in Miracles every day for 3 years. I did it with a study group, 1 hour a day. And the Course in Miracles is 365 lessons to heal to basically forgive all the shit that you've ever beaten yourself up for, and find a way to operate from a heart-centered space.
You brought up your YouTube. We've talked about it a couple of times so far in this conversation.
Yeah.
When did that become part of the plan, or when did you get on that platform to expand your brand? Because we go back to 09 and 10. I don't imagine that was part of the business plan.
No, in fact, I resisted video for the longest time. And I had a friend who actually is a coach for shy guys, who has basically he's the shy guy coach. He has a channel with 900,000 plus subscribers and 200 million views, maybe 250 million views. And for years, he kept bugging me, do videos. And I was resistant. Finally, in the beginning of last year, I decided, and I shot videos before, but I started to actually be more intentional. Well, I had 1,000 subscribers a year and a half ago, and now I have 62,000. So, and from that, my business has gone from a low or a high 5-figure business to a medium 6-figure business.
Nice.
By literally using the power of video to connect with my audience.
Why were you so resistant, and why do you feel like you connected in such a way that you've gained tens of thousands of followers at a time when a lot of people were struggling to even get a few?
Yeah. So, well, first and foremost, talking in front of a camera for 3, 4, 5 to 10 minutes and riffing and being coherent to some degree is a challenge in and of itself.
Yes, it is.
And I do no editing. My videos are stream of consciousness. If I have a faux pas, it's part of it. And it's partly because I don't know how to edit. And I don't choose to. So at first, there was the fear of just talking. But what I did was, for 2 years prior to that, I used to do Facebook Lives in my private group. So I kind of learned the skill set of it. And then eventually I shifted to doing these what's called talking head videos that are anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long. Now I do live streams where I'm interacting with my audience through a live chat, which makes it actually easier for me.
Yes.
And now I do 1 hour videos. I would say 99 out of 100 people will never get in front of a video camera and talk for 1 hour straight. And either A, they have the fear around it, or B, they don't have the wherewithal to actually have, to be able to be articulate and have that kind of content. So I had to build the skill first. And now I post on average of 30, I post a video every day, 30 videos a month on my channel.
That's intense. That is
yeah, yeah, but it's also paying off, because from a business perspective, I get ad revenue, I sell my books, I get leads for my business. And that's why I went from a high 5-figure business to a mid 6-figure business, because of the power of video.
Yeah, and I resisted video as well. When I started this podcast in January and February, it was going to be an audio only. I'm a radio guy. The podcast.
Oh yeah, you have. By the way, you have such a radio voice.
It's the microphone. It's the microphone.
Okay. No. You got it down, dude.
2 years ago, I had a podcast, and it was audio only. I would do some clips, but not a video. I would just grab the audio and put it over a picture, and that would be it.
Yeah.
And for 2 or 3 months, that was, quote, good enough for what I was doing. And it basically was like, you know what, you've got to start a YouTube channel. You just need to. In this day and age, you can't just be on one platform, rely on one platform. You need to kind of shotgun it. And YouTube, especially doing this on Zoom, was kind of the no-brainer from that standpoint.
Yeah. When I started with my YouTube channel, and I started a podcast, and I used to record separate podcasts. And then finally, I just got tired of doing that. So now I just take my YouTube videos, download the audio, and put it on Apple and Google and all the other places with a tiny little bit of editing. But that way I'm not duplicating efforts. But now I'm on all those platforms as well as YouTube. And it's funny, my son says I should post my videos on Pornhub.
Oh God.
And I'm like, what the fuck? And he goes, yeah, you'd be surprised how many people are, well, Pornhub is much bigger than any of those platforms.
Yeah,
so.
it's routinely in like the top 2 or 3 visited websites of any day, any month, any year.
I'm like, well, I kind of put myself out there as being kind of a top-notch dating and relationship coach. Do I really want to go there? And he's like, you would gain more market share. And I'm like, maybe. But I'm now doing TikTok, and I shoot 60-second videos for YouTube, and now I put on TikTok and Instagram.
And you talk about the 60-second videos. I just in the last maybe 6 weeks, the YouTube Shorts, the beta was out there for a while. I think they've actually gone live with it, where they're like, okay, this is a thing now. This is YouTube Shorts, and taking advantage. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine who's starting his podcast, taking advantage of where platforms want to push people. The algorithm of Instagram Reels over stories, over posts, TikTok, obviously, YouTube. Yes, you can have full episodes or full videos, full length videos, but they would really love you to do some shorts, because that's what they want to push now.
So what I do is, and by the way, now shorts is how do you convey a lot of quality information in 59 seconds?
Yeah.
So that's a separate skill set than the other skill set, to be able to be punchy. So what I now do in my YouTube channel is I do 3 shorts a week that correspond on a day that I'm going to do a live stream. So in the morning they get a short, in the evening they get a live stream. So I do that. Then what I do is I take some of my live stream videos and I clip videos from that. I take some portions that was good content.
Yep.
I post that on the separate days. And then once a week, I do a video out on my balcony. It's very, it's very calm, cool, collected. And I do about a 15-minute video there. So I'm trying to cover a different bases, if you will. Some are clips, some are live streams, some are short talking heads, or the shorts, and then a longer, more sincere video.
I think lives for me are probably what's next, but I've only done one live. I did an Instagram live. It's probably been about 3 months or so, maybe even more than that. And I immediately, when I saw somebody in the chat who I knew and recognized, I immediately said, come on live with me. Come on.
Yeah.
Because I was so scared to just be on my own, and so scared to just put myself out there without being able to lean on somebody, hence this podcast with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you, like anything, it's a skill set. I started with 1 live a week, then I bumped it up to 2, and now I do 3 a week. I'm going to say there's also some, the byproduct benefit of that is that I'm getting longer watch time on my channel. Then it hits other videos. I'm monetizing all this. So what's interesting is in the last 90 days, my shorts are getting higher views than some of my other videos because of that. And I look at my analytics for my shorts. I'm literally, if I have a 59-second video, the average watch time is 56 seconds. So
that's great.
They're watching the entire thing. Whereas on TikTok, you're kind of swiping, you may catch a second. Yeah. I'm noticing that I'm getting full retention on the shorts versus like an hour live stream. And the average watch time might be 20 minutes instead of 55 minutes.
Yeah. Somebody will drop in, hang out for a little while and pop back out. But you put a short out there and they're probably going to stick around for the whole thing because again, it's a minute. Let's keep them.
Although the short I posted today bombed.
Well, but that's just it. We don't, I will never profess to know why something picked up, why an algorithm picked up on one video versus another.
Well, so I'm going to give you a little trick if you want to.
Yeah, please.
Something. So when my buddy who had the 900,000 subscribers, he said, what you're going to do at first is do what's called proven titles. So you go through other contemporaries' titles, you find their best videos, the highest viewed videos, take that title because it's usually keyword rich. Mm-hmm. So what you want to find is keyword rich video titles. And by the way, since nobody owns a title, no title is owned by any human being, you can utilize titles. And by the way, you'll see sometimes multiple people use the same title.
Yes.
What that does is someone's viewing it, your video may pop up next on the screen. So a lot of podcasters and other people don't recognize that the most important thing you have to do is the title and then the thumbnail that goes with the title. So when I started that, everything changed because I started to get more views.
Nice.
And I don't consider that being disingenuous in any sense of the word, because the reality is my content is my content and it's exclusive to me. At least and by the way, we oftentimes, many people will say the same thing because universal truths are universal truths.
Yep.
But ultimately, how you deliver the truth is going to be different than someone else.
Well, what I'm going to do is every short that I produce based on this episode is just going to have the title from your most popular video. I'm just throwing it out there right now. And because what I've been doing.
And then at the end, you say in bed.
Because what I've been
title
doing
was how to change a difficult guy in bed. I'm doing the fortune cookie joke.
Oh, it's so good. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Shout out Jen Amber, by the way. She's the one who put us in touch. And anybody who's willing to put themselves out there the way that she has, the way that you have, absolutely want them on the podcast. So if you know anybody else that has a story to share, wants to share their story, help lift others to where you are, and we go on this journey together. Send them my way. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, I just want to piggyback for those listening to this. Gin Amber, Gin Amber. She is an amazing human being. She cares so much from the bottom of her heart to make a difference in people's lives. She's in the skin and face care business. And if you're listening to this right now, please go to her YouTube channel too, because she's good people.
I'll link it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, she introduced me to you, and I was, the minute we connected, I'm like, yes, I'd like to do this, because, a lot of people do this stuff for the money. I'm grateful. I'm blessed in my business. I absolutely get off on personal development. I'm a human behavior junkie. And I would love to see humans, and I say humans, learn to love themselves from such a place of love and compassion, because John Lennon said it best, all we need is love. And I piggyback on that.
Jonathon, thank you so much for this. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Aron. This has been a blast.
Thanks for watching the Aron Bender podcast, whether it's on YouTube, IGTV, or DBNA TV. If you have comments or guest ideas, email me, aronbendermedia@gmail.com. Connect with me on social media, aronbender.com. Be well, and thanks for watching.